We're now going to shift into hearing from our state elected officials. I have the great pleasure of introducing Dawn Addis. In 2022, she was elected to the California State Assembly to represent the coastal 30th Assembly District, which includes large portions of San Luis Obispo and Monterey counties and the southeastern area of Santa Cruz County. She is the Assistant Majority Leader for Policy and Research, the Assembly appointee to the Ocean Protection Council, the inaugural chair of the California Legislative Central Coast Caucus, and the president of the California Legislative Central Coast Caucus Foundation. I think I can add some more, Dawn. And also got to spend some time with her. She was a teacher for 20 years. In addition to everything I just listed, she chairs the Assembly Select Committee on Offshore Wind Energy in California and the Assembly Select Committee on Serving Students with Disabilities. Dawn has achieved many firsts. Her long record of community involvement includes co-founding the Women's March in San Luis Obispo and being a Planned Parenthood Central Coast Action Fund board member. In 2018, she won her first elected office to Morro Bay City Council and served from 2018 to 2022. She is the first Democrat to represent the majority of San Luis Obispo County in the State Assembly since 1947. She is also the first Democrat from San Luis Obispo County to serve in the State Assembly since 1922, and the first Democratic woman to ever hold this seat. And she is also a very fashionable and colorful dresser, something that I very connected with her in the back. So please join me in welcoming this woman of many firsts to kick off our state discussions.
I am a classroom teacher as well as a state legislator, so I just want to say, if you've been sitting all morning, don't leave, but if you want to stand up, please do. I'm super happy to be here with you and want to say thank you so much for inviting me to this conference. So I do represent from Santa Cruz down to southern San Luis Obispo County, which is 20% of California's coast. And I'm also chairing, as you just heard, the California Legislative Central Coast Caucus. And together we have members that represent 42% of California. I'm also a resident of Morro Bay, that is at the center of offshore wind energy development. And I will tell you that this topic is incredibly important to communities across the Central Coast. Probably my most important job, though, is being a mom. We have 2 college-age kids who want to live in a climate, in a future where they don't have to worry. They want to live where humans and animals on our planet don't just survive, but they thrive. And they want weather patterns that all of us feel comfortable in, that we're not afraid when winter is coming. And so with that, I'm a huge proponent of offshore wind energy when it's done right. And I'll talk a little bit about that today. But thirdly, I'm a proud state California legislator. And in California, as we're all here to talk about, we go big, but not because it's cool to go big, it's our charge to go big. And it's incredibly important that we go big when we address the climate crisis. It's our duty and our responsibility for the health of our communities. So I would say that one of the most important things as we move forward is that offshore wind energy development is founded in science, and that it takes local community voices, labor voices, and tribal voices into consideration. And I'm super excited about the variety of people at this conference today. When I look out, and I actually can't see you, but I know that you're there, what I see is my colleagues. Actually, there's a number of them that are going to come do a panel in the back. My colleagues from the state legislature. I know there's federal representatives. There's local folks that are gathered here today. I know that we have tribal nation partners and education leaders. We have environmental champions. We have labor leaders. We have developers and industry professionals. And it's this variety of people that are gathered that are going to make offshore wind energy development in California go well. So I want to talk a little bit about the local context. And as I mentioned, I'm from Morro Bay, and you heard in my bio that I was on the Morro Bay City Council, elected in 2018, and that's where 3 of the 5 call areas are. And so I started thinking about offshore wind energy as a council member. And now, a number of years later, offshore wind development is becoming real. When I first heard about it, nobody could believe it in 2018. We thought it was a fantasy. And over the years, we've gotten to see that real things are happening locally across our globe and across our nation. We're moving into surveying, planning, permitting stages of development, and it's truly exciting. But as you can imagine, a lot of questions come up. We know that offshore wind energy can bring new jobs to Californians. We know that offshore wind energy can spur investment in California communities. And we know that offshore wind energy can keep the lights on for millions of families across California with carbon-free energy. But people locally have questions. They want to know what's going to happen with offshore wind energy and ancestral lands and oceans. They want to know what's going to happen to vital habitats and ecosystems. They want to know what are the local infrastructure improvements that are going to be needed. And most importantly, they want to know what is this going to do to a coastal way of life that is important to so many Californians. And at this time, I would say it's been easy for harmful myths to flourish. There's myths that have the potential to disrupt and delay these projects locally and the support that's going on locally. And so that's why it's important for me and for all of you to come together. Me as a legislator, it's important that as we move offshore wind development energy forward, we're founded in science and that we do engage local communities, and that we can dispel myths and incorporate local feedback as well as feedback from tribes and labor and all of the entities that are out in this room today. So in the Assembly, I am very honored that the Speaker did appoint me as chair of the Offshore Wind Select Committee so that we can invest in the issues at hand and look for local solutions. We've been leaders in the Assembly and across the legislature in terms of moving offshore wind energy forward. I also introduced 2 bills last year, AB 80, and you heard this panel talk about it, to get a science monitoring entity set up with OPC, and we're in negotiations with the governor's office right now about funding for that entity. And then we have a new bill, which is actually, in my opinion, very innovative, AB 2537, that would create a capacity building fund, because many of the local communities and tribes feel like they don't even know yet how to engage in a community benefits conversation. They still need more expertise to engage deeply in the conversations we need as we move offshore wind forward in California. And so that's what the Capacity Building Fund would do. It would help them get to a place where they feel comfortable in those kinds of conversations and negotiations. And we're very proud that that bill passed successfully through Natural Resources and Utilities and Energy. And I'm sure you've had a lot of conversation about the ports, and so I was very proud to to support a letter to preserve $45 million in funding for key port planning and engagement. And my colleagues and many folks in the legislature are really advocating to get more money to the ports, which is going to be incredibly important as California moves forward with offshore wind. So in closing, I will reiterate that in the Assembly and in the legislature, we have been on the forefront of offshore wind energy development because California does believe climate change is real. California knows that it's time for transition, and we want to build healthy communities for our children and for the future. And I will also say that when offshore wind is done right, we will benefit our ecosystems. We will benefit biodiversity. We will benefit human communities. And that's when we're working all together to do that. So there is still tremendous work ahead of us, as we all know. And I do believe that we are going to go big. We're going to go big on offshore wind energy, we're going to go big on our climate goals, and we're going to go big on support for our local communities and the science behind the changes that we need to see. So with that, I'll give you 1 minute back. I know your other panel went long, but I'll give you 1 minute back before the next panel and say thank you so much for the invite, and thank you so much for having me.